Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.3, in which I am attempting to make Kerbals a multiplanetary species. And in this, the 100th episode, we are finally launching something new as we move into the next phase of our plan. And even though we are kind of winding things down at this point and getting ready to wrap this up, we're tying loose ends as opposed to opening up new threads, we still have some stuff that we want to get done. So let's get to it, shall we? All right, so what we have here is what I am calling the Frontier Cruiser. So we're going to start this reactor. What this is going to be is we are going to be, while we are waiting for our shakeout testing of the actual base, I'm going to give it about 25-ish days to run and see how it's working, because that's about how much supplies that the lowest set of Kerbals had on those bases. So they'll be able to survive at least that long, and if there's an issue, then I can figure out what the deal is. And in the meantime, we are going to set up the next set of crew that is coming out to Duna. So we have here the Frontier Cruiser. This is going to be the vessel that is the cruise liner that takes everybody out there. What I have is a big box of supplies and fertilizer that I'm going to put in this inflatable storage, which I could not inflate while I was inside the VAB, so we're just going to do that now. So we have this, click that, transfer it all out, boom. Okay, that took a little bit of time. I guess that's fine. Let's go a little bit faster, please. 2,500 per second, maybe? Okay. Anyways, now, fertilizer. On the big fertilizer tank. Transfer. Boom. Perfect. Okay, so that's what these were, and now we can just detach that, and that will just kind of sit and not bother me anymore. Wonderful. So our reactor is on. We are going to leave the radiators closed for the moment because we don't want them tearing off. We have a big collection of carborundum. We are using the new torch drives, which use water, which means I have decommissioned all of my old ones because they did not work anymore. We can turn everything else on when we get to space. All right. So this thing is empty and can fly empty, so we will be doing that and then docking up the crew. 3, 2, 1, launch. And detach the clamps and off we go. Now this should be a fairly simple launch because this just uses the biggest possible torch drive, which is the only one that I found that is actually worth using anymore. This has a big 5-meter SAS, not the big Taurus, but still a fairly large one, which should help us get flipped around if we need to. And we are using power, fantastic. We are going a little bit straight up because this thing is not precisely aerodynamic. Oh dear. As I said, this thing is not precisely aerodynamic. Point prograde, please. Goodness. Okay, come on. Yeah, thankfully this thing has a fairly tremendous amount of delta V and a fairly tremendous amount of thrust. We are still at about 2.0 or so, it claims, which means hopefully we should be able to still get out of the atmosphere, but I guess just not as optimally as I would have liked. But this is the only time that this Frontier Cruiser is going to have to experience atmosphere. And it looks like we are now up high enough that this thing is back under control. Fantastic. So we are going to go for about 125 kilometer circular orbit, and I'm going to try to scrub off some of this extra inclination, get this down as close to 0 as possible to make it easier to rendezvous. All right, so we are just about out of the atmosphere, and we can set this thing up for its circularization burn at apoapsis. Go ahead and circularize. So we got 3 minutes before this burn, so let's go ahead and start turning some of this stuff on. So we can start this recycler and the crew quarters, make sure that's all set up. There were crew in here, but I took them out with ship manifest, so I imagine these inventories will disappear in a moment, or at least the names will change. So, lights on, fabulous, recycler stuff. Okay, great. So that's that. We are going to extend all of our communications antenna, and then we have all these little observation cupolas to help with the habitation timers. Habitat. And back here we have more viewing cupolas of different flavors, which is nice. Kerbitat, start hab common. Start the habitat of the habitation ring. So the habitation ring has a huge number of raw time, which is what you get out of hab quarters, and then the Kerbitat has hab common, which is going to work as a multiplier. So we're going to have a huge amount of stuff of habitation time on this vessel. We're going to start some agroponics from these nomomatics, which is going to make sure that this thing can recycle food and use this fertilizer that we brought along to multiply the amount of supplies by a fairly large amount. Then working back, we have the nuclear reactor. We are extending these radiators, which can start rejecting that heat and making sure this thing does not overreact. Okay, sorry. But yeah, so that should be everything that this vessel is and all this vessel does. I'm a little concerned with the new calculations because the new torch drives, as I have done a little bit of research on them, they now act more like, you know, every other space propulsion, highly efficient space propulsion system, in that they are relatively low thrust. Like, the thrust has been dropped dramatically. Like, it was tens of thousands higher on the version that I had before, but we have 9,000 thrust at 9,000 kilonewtons of thrust and 25,000 second specific impulse, which means that we are really going to be able to get places with this thing still. It is able to carry this big tank of water and all this other stuff and not really blink much of an eye. So the 5-meter one is the one that is good for what we're going to be doing, but that does mean that we are not using it for other things. For example, this new crew vessel, which uses swivels. Like I said, it uses LFO because that is much easier to deal with than the other things that I was looking at. 3, 2, 1, launch. So we have here the crew shuttle, which is what we are going to be using as a reusable vessel back and forth along with the Frontier Cruiser. This is going to be the ship that is delivering crew to and from the surface of Duna, and also possibly to and from the surface of Kerbin. I've done some testing on Kerbin, and it is able to land safely and re-enter. So we may use that for all of our crew needs going forward, and it has enough Delta V packed away for it to be able to both land and take off from Duna. So the idea is this is going to be our reusable vessel that we're going to be shuttling crew to and from the surface of Duna. And also it's nice and safe for use in... Ooh, that one didn't seem to have any fuel. I don't know what that was about. And it should be safe to carry people out of the atmosphere of Kerbin as well. Yeah, because we're going kind of full expendables coming out of the atmosphere of Kerbin here, but I'm just super not worried about it. At least we're not using cheaty torch drives and stuff. The ore-based torch drives from before, I can at least admit, were a little bit hacks. So now we have to look at other methods, which is exactly what you look for. Like, there are things that the torch drive is good at and things that it is less good at now. It's not the perfect engine for all occasions, which means I don't have to use it every time, which means I no longer find it to be broken. That's kind of what my point is on overpowered engines. Like, it doesn't matter if it's overpowered, really, but the key is if it obviates every other choice, then that's not good design. Kick off that first stage and fire up the second, which is going to take us hopefully directly up into an encounter with the Frontier Cruiser. But yeah, once these meet up, then we will be able to deliver that crew out towards Duna, and I will use that transit time as the shakeout testing of the all of our habitation modules out on Duna. So we will see how that goes. I'm a little bit concerned, but everything should be working. Famous last words and all that, but everything should be everything was designed to be functional in this stage for the small amount of crew that is there. So we will gain a lot of information by finding out what happens in 20 or 30 days. All right, so as we get this up into out of the atmosphere, we're still kind of down a little bit. We can kind of take a look at this. The bottom here is this is the second stage, so this is going to all fall away. But from here on up is the vessel. We have ladders. These are just kind of bolt-on boosters to spread out the thrust vector so that we can move it around the center point, around the center of gravity, to very easily maneuver with engines that vector. How nice is that? That was one of the major issues that I was having with the torch drives before as well. Lots of monopropellant and RCS, and also reaction control wheels. In the center here, we have a reactor that we are turning on. We are just about out of the atmosphere, so we can extend these radiators, turn those on. And then we have the actual crew sustaining portion, which is going to help out a little bit with that, because it will be attaching. So let's aim the camera up top so I can actually get in here. And yeah, we have 4 of these. They don't need to be deployed because they're just passenger cabins. So this is not meant to be living space, but there is some additional agroponics modules that I've bolted onto the bottom here, just as an emergency supply of food, to help provide that little stopgap and to actually bolster the stuff that works on the Frontier cruiser itself, because just in case they need to stay in orbit for a little while or stay on the ground for a little while before refueling or something, I don't know. It looks nice. All right, we are on final approach to the Frontier cruiser, so let's go ahead and stop this velocity. Are. And there we go. Now we're just drifting slightly. So what I'm going to do now is we are going to spin it up and use a centrifugal force to kick off the lower stage, which I will switch to and send on its merry way. And it will now impact the surface. Fabulous. Don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay, so flip up to the Frontier cruiser. Go ahead and open the shield. And then back to open this shield on the crew shuttle. We're going to open our docking assistant window. And we are going to notice also, while I do this, that the game is just running so much better now that I've upgraded my computer quite a bit. I spent a good chunk of money on Black Friday for a brand new CPU, and it has paid dividends as far as my KSP game is concerned. Alright, we are just about there. And just push it forward just slightly, and kerchunk, there we go. We are all docked up and all ready to go and head out to Duna. Fabulous. So, let's save the game, and we can move around some crew a little bit here. Where is everybody? Maybe I do that through roster now, I guess. Okay. Assigned to the Frontier cruiser. Fabulous. Don't create Kerbals. I just want to move people. Can I just move them? Not from this. Okay, that's fine. Where is everybody? Not this one. Here is everybody. Go away. Transfer crew. Let's all transfer into the habitation ring. Okay, I finally figured out the right set of buttons and things to have checked to turn off the ship manifest transfer, which just takes too long when you have as many people to move as I do. But we're able to move everybody over. Tanless, I'd like you to be up in the front. I'd like Carrie Kerman to be back here in the Nomalmatic. And everybody else, it doesn't really matter. So we can just transfer people over into the habitation ring. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Everybody's moved. Fantastic. So now we can take a look and see that we have 11 years of habitation and homesick time available on this ship, which is great. That's exactly what we're looking for. We don't want to be really hurting anybody's habitation or homesick time during this transit. And we have over a year worth of supplies packed on board as well, and I don't think that even includes how much we are going to be regenerating. So this is exactly what we need. The engines on this are not turned on, which is exactly also what we want. So now we can start planning our transit to Duna. Alright, so we have our trajectory here. We are going to spend on the first burn about 8,000 meters per second to get out there, and that's going to get us there in 84 days, which is pretty darn good without spending too much fuel. Because we are constrained on both water and carborundum on this flight. And then when we get there, we are just going to spend 5,000 meters per second to slow down. And then we can actually, now that I think about it, in the second, we can come into a near polar trajectory coming over so that we don't have to worry so much about anything else. We do, because we want to rendezvous with the Starlifter shuttle before anything else. Because the Starlifter shuttle is stuck in that orbit, as I recall. Yeah, so we're going to want an orbit something like this so that we can match this orbit pretty closely when we go by, and then we can meet up with the Starlifter shuttle, grab those people that are there on board, and then descend, take the vessel, get the crew shuttle down with everybody. All right, so that's the plan. We are going to control from here, point in the right direction, and this is going to be like I said, this is now a more traditional, more balanced engine, so when this burns, it's going to take a long time. 2, 1, burn! Okay, so yeah, even with the crew shuttle on the front of this, this is going to be able to take stuff out pretty darn quickly. It's got a thrust to weight ratio of, looks like 1.74, which is pretty dang nice considering everything. But yeah, it just uses plain water, which is wonderful, and eats up this carborundum slowly. So we can restock all of those things next time this gets back in front of Kerbin. And the crew shuttle itself is going to be something that can restock itself anywhere, because it just uses monopropellant and liquid fuel and oxidizer, as well as supplies, fertilizer, that sort of thing. All stuff that is being made locally, as opposed to carborundum and water and ore, which ore and water we would be able to get, but it's a lot easier to get LFO. So I guess I'll see you guys in 7 minutes. Alright, just a couple seconds until our final course correction. And shoop, you can see that orbit line sweeping in. Nice. Perfect. Exactly what we're looking for. And we will be there in just 85 days. Beautiful. Okay, so we have changed SOI, so we are now in orbit of the sun, and on our transfer over, we will wait the 84 days and some odd hours until we arrive at Duna. But until then, I have to test, then see in about 24 days exactly how things have gone with our colonists. Alright, so we've reloaded, and now we are taking a look And looks like we still, once again, have 24 days of supplies. We are back up to about where we left them as far as supplies are concerned, which is why we picked the amount of time that we did. Their habitation and home sickness times are still indefinite because they have such... like, each person can actually have their own little inflatable, which is kind of awesome, which lets them start working on the geology bonuses even before we actually get all of the colonists here, which is pretty darn cool. I've also decided to use fresh recruits for the staffing up this base because I want to see these if we can get these up to 500%. I don't know if that's possible in the time frame that we're looking at, but I guess we'll just see what happens. So yeah, this looks like it worked. We have supply still running. Take a look at everything. I think we've just lost some stages that crashed. That's fine. But yeah, we've got more fertilizer than when we started. We're using up mulch, but also seem to be creating mulch because we're not out of this. Seems to be creating supplies. We're going to need machinery eventually, but at this point, it's not that big of a deal. Looks like we've still got some supplies over here on this side. They have 12 days left. Theoretically, they should be able to pull... maybe they can't. Interesting. I'm not sure if they can actually pull resources in. I'm trying to think of which one it is. So quartermasters allow you to pull, not push. Because everything can push. You have to have a quartermaster to pull. So we may need to move these folks over to the main base for purposes of supplies. Just so that I don't have to bounce back and forth. But they have been using supplies at a fair pace, so let's... what's a good way to test this? Just take some supplies. So they have 50... Oop, looks like it actually yanked the supplies right back out. Interesting. Let me see what happens in 10 more days. Just to test this. Okay, so we are back at the base, and down to 400 supplies, but they were up to 557 a second ago. I saw it. I did. So what do you have? 1217. Interesting. I'm not 100% sure where all the food is going, but it looks like this is working out. It looks like they're passing it around. I wonder if they're actually passing supplies to other bases, though. No supplies. No supplies. Okay, well, anyways, I'm not 100% sure if that is actually working the way that I'm hoping it will. However, we can look at our colony inventory to see that we are increasing our supply by 0.0183 per second. I think that means that they have a 30-day... I mean, this says supply 30 days, so that means, I guess, that it's a 30-day supply, or 30 days until it's full. The number is increasing, so that makes me think that that is the amount of food that they have remaining, but I'm not 100% sure. So we have like 1,600 or so supplies between the two bases, which I feel like is less than was there before, but I'm not 100% sure. So I think the best way to do is just to save the game again, and we'll see what happens when the Frontier Cruiser arrives. Okay, yes, so we have learned that, well, if I leave them there this whole time, they will not make it because there is not a transfer of food back and forth. Let me test one other thing. Okay, so I've done some testing with a couple different, done some testing with a pilot in the Caribou Expedition rover and a pilot in the logistics tower over at Duna Central, and waiting too long or letting it go the 50 days until the Frontier Cruiser gets here will kill anybody that's not inside the botany lab directly. I think that the issue is that I would need quartermasters in both to transfer the food. I'm not 100% sure. So for now, I'm just going to move everybody into the botany lab, and they can move back and forth between the botany lab and the Duna Central for habitation on their own. The USI life support takes into account that all of this habitation stuff is basically stapled onto this, and I'm able to use both for calculations, which works out as far as that's concerned. But having everybody inside the same vessel that is also doing all of the agroponics work means I'm not going to have to worry one bit about surviving the long time warps. So that is going to be how we're going to get through the next bit, and until the Frontier Cruiser gets here and we're able to move on to the next phase of starting to gear up and crew up, that is to say, our base. And that will do it for this episode, I think. I believe in the next episode, are going to have the Frontier Cruiser bring in the new Kerbals. We're going to bring people down to the surface and so forth, and that is going to begin the next phase of testing out our facilities with a higher number of crew and all of our facilities active. And then finally, we'll be able to see if we can start bringing the colonists over. And so, yeah, just a couple more episodes. If you enjoyed this one, please share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.